Hello and welcome to the hard sell, where the stick in the swill bucket rattles back. And welcome to 2021, which is a year, and that's all I'm prepared to say about it right now. We're starting out tentatively here on the hard sell with a nice, simple
have a break
episode. Today's break comes from the 15th of February 1992, close to 30 years ago. Very different world. The Soviet Union had just collapsed, ending the Cold War for good and causing Francis Fukuyama to declare the end of all history, which turned out to be premature. The Gulf War was a year earlier. John Major was about to be re-elected, almost by mistake, and the European community was transforming into the European Union, which everyone was very excited about except for racists and nationalists.
You can't risk missing this one. At long last, Europe's open for business.
Seize the opportunity. Phone 01200 1992.
And TVS, the ITV franchisees for the south of England, albeit 10 months from closure, was showing the UK TV premiere of Three Men and a Baby. And this is the third commercial break from that showing.
You see, the new Astra GSI's traction control system.
And we start off in Luton, presumably. That's where Vauxhall's head office is, and that seems to be where this first advert is set. One of a series for the then new Astra Mark III. Well, newish anyway. The two previous models were a rebadged Opel. This one went the other way.
Stops your wheels from spinning in tough driving conditions, like ice. It's unique in its class.
Sounds very complicated, Mr. Atkins.
Yes, well, excuse me, Gloriette.
Astra ads could be distinguished from Cavalier or Carlton ads by the cast. Tom Conti as Wormy Dogsbody Atkins, and Nigel Hawthorne as J.D., the unspecified Vauxhall executive supposedly in charge of the Astras. I'm sure that's how GM's corporate structure works. Of course, now they're owned by Peugeot, so they probably have a cigarette-based managerial structure. The CEO is a 3-pack-a-day man, while Atkins gets 1 or 2 if he does a decent enough job, and the poor sots on factory floor have to scrape together whatever beedies they can get together from the executive's ashtrays. Anyway, generally the premise of an Atkins JD advert would have the two of them puzzling out how to sell an Astra, with JD being stony-faced and professional, and Atkins usually getting one or both of them into some kind of vaguely slapstick scrape, in time for the riff from Layla and Bell Gothic lettering, trademarks of Vauxhall advertising in the early 90s, to scream in at the end. This one also stars Barbara Durkin and Michelle Winstanley for some lady interest.
Imagine my foot is a wheel. Now, if I were to step on this slippery banana skin, I would fall over. But if I had traction control, power would automatically be cut to my foot. Ginny, get off the way.
Not now. There's what they...
JD hasn't got traction control then.
I don't think the double act of two middle-aged white men in suits really caught the public's imagination much, despite their being the ostensible faces of the damn car until, apparently, 1996.
Some of our members are running scared. The PM said if Sir Frank were to resign, he'd have no alternative but to promote Jonathan.
Yes, and we all know what that means.
Here's some sinister and yet adorable Westminster canine frolics for a despicable newspaper, not a despicable snoozepaper.
I don't think I'm giving away any secrets if I tell you that the Permanent Secretary likes exotic and
Of course, the black dog is more usually associated as a symbol for depression. But I've never been fond of that metaphor, largely because I have owned and known several black dogs, and they have all been good boys and good girl. This makes it hard to associate them with the shrieking void of emptiness at the centre of my very being, which is not a good boy. More like a rat, or a colony of particularly loathsome insects.
You'd be surprised which members voted against, Peter.
George. Michael.
Yes, even Michael.
Of course, this being the Mail, or its sister paper at least, there are other resonances to the imagery of a big black watchful hound that I'm sure they'd rather I didn't bring up. Hurrah for the black dogs!
Officially, of course, the Foreign Office have denied everything.
It takes a special sort of political animal to find out what's really going on at Westminster. Read Black Dog, only in the Mail on Sunday.
Most people think of America as the land of freedom.
What? Who invited you, George Bush? George Bush, what are you doing here?
But to those who have visited here, it's also a place of beauty, wonder, and excitement.
Apparently this thing was made to tempt Japanese tourists, but they tried it out on muggins here first, by which I mean the UK. Perhaps they were worried about the optics of an advert fronted by the man who vomited on the Prime Minister.
From rolling green fields to sandy white beaches, the red-hot Dixieland jazz. Today there are more reasons than ever to visit America.
It's oddly timed in another way as well. 1992 is an election year, albeit we're at the start of it. And here's the incumbent president taking a break from his busy break-taking schedule to deliver a piece to camera in reliably blurry NTSC about how bloody fucking great his country is and why you should visit the bastard. When he really should be campaigning to keep his job. Not that I have any particular problem with the fact that he wasn't. Take all the time off you like, George. To be fair, as I said, it is only February. And as the incumbent, he didn't have primaries to worry about. In fact, at this stage, the thinking around Bush and his party was that he barely had an election to worry about either. He was polling well enough after the Gulf War. His approval at one point hit 89%. That 1992 was largely written off by most of the mainstream Democrats when primary time rolled around, and many of the obvious candidates held fire until 1996. Joe Biden, Mario Cuomo, Jesse Jackson, Al Gore, although in his case it was because his son was in a car crash, so he had bigger things to worry about, assuming the inevitability of a second Bush term. And of course they were wrong, and in many cases lost their last chance in the process, as the hitherto relatively obscure governor of Arkansas rose through the rather lacklustre final lineup to take not only the nomination, but the White House. Partly because he turned out to be so much better at this sort of advertising job.
And there's never been a better time than now. So what are you waiting for?
Do you really want us to answer that?
An invitation from the president?
Not that we can really cast nasturtiums on the presidency from here in the future. I'd gladly take a second 4-year term for this fucker over the actual occupant of 1600 since 2017. Even senile and actively dying on wheels. Even though he'd have to go through his last 2 years as a corpse. 2 years of Weekend at Bernie's would still be preferable.
America, it's yours to discover.
Oh hey, Bush was just talking about jazz, America's only native art form, and here's some right now that we've ruined. It's the new Cadbury's Twirl. Layered chocolate dipped in some more chocolate. Sounds good to me. I might have brought this up in an Easter episode, I genuinely can't remember anymore. But the thing they've decided to go for in launching this thing is taking a break. A bit like that other multi-fingered chocolate bar. By which I do of course mean the Time Out. The same thing as this, with a wafer, launched around about the same time. For Twirl, they've done this via a bastardised version of Take 5 and some Ponzi dancers, including a prick in a white leotard who seems to think he's Michael Jackson.
Just take 5, just take 5.
Cadbury's Twirl. 2 folded fingers coated in delicious Cadbury's chocolate.
Hang on, is that Malcolm McLaren?
Chocolate.
Why yes it is. He's also responsible for the music, you'll be unsurprised to hear. It's part of his latest project, having single-handedly invented punk, hip-hop, sampling and dicking around with classical music. He was now inventing jazz.
Chocolate. Take 5 for a Cadbury's Twirl.
Yes? Yes, yes. Is this about something?
With some high-interest accounts, you lose interest on withdrawal unless you give 90 days' notice. But we've made a change, because we don't want to lose you.
It's the second slowest advert for a bank I've ever seen. By advertising standards, this takes forever to demonstrate where the hell it's going, with its 2 showgirls and their inexplicable number boards bobbing about for a full 10 seconds. That's a long time in an advert, especially when it's not making sense. Before Doctor Who finally appears on the soundtrack to provide much-needed context.
TSB.
You might see TSB these days around your local high street, back when it was safe to leave the house, but technically it's not even the same company. It's a fresh one, prized out of a mid-90s merger between this one here and Lloyd's, resulting in a merged identity that was basically entirely dominated by the larger company. Come the massive financial crisis of 2008 and the resultant government bailout in 2009, Lloyd's TSB was ordered to divest a chunk of itself in order to qualify for state aid. So a big hunk of the conglomerate was cut away, made independent, and given an old brand name that was gathering dust under the desks at Lloyd's HQ. Since then, the new TSB has essentially sat around waiting to be absorbed into some other major banking matrix, like Santander or HSBC or something. Anyway, back to 1992 and the original Trustee Savings Bank. TSB's identity as the bank that likes to say yes was so embedded in the public consciousness by now that they were actually shifting it up a bit in the advertising. It's a given that they're going to say yes since they love it so much. Now they want you to do the same.
We want you to say yes.
I do like this stone effect and Clarendonish serif lettering at the end here. This is what banks should look like. Serious and stately. Stop trying to be my friend. We all know you people are bastards.
We want you to say yes.
Hello there. You know, sometimes photocopiers really crease me up.
Remember this friendly abomination? The spokes entity for Canon, made up of a giant photo printed onto several pieces of A4 paper? Well, here he is to explain that photocopiers annoy him. Which I suppose they would. I mean, they annoy everyone. But if you're literally made of paper, you could be forgiven for seeing them as being basically the enemy.
That's why Canon have made theirs simple enough to use, standing on your head. Just like this.
There's not many corporate mascots that could decapitate themselves to demonstrate something or other.
So don't get a headache, get a Canon.
Canon. They're Japanese, go figure.
On paper, if anyone can, Canon.
Were photocopiers a growth market among the kind of audience tuning into 3 Men and a Baby? Well, someone's got to buy them. Nunc est bibendum. Latin for it's pissing down. It would appear to be a bad time for writing endless mathematical equations on the road with chalk, but I suppose if you're having that kind of breakdown, you don't really care either way.
In all driving conditions, the new Michelin gives miles more grip than ever before.
The point, somehow, is to demonstrate that Michelin tyres grip in all sorts of conditions. Desert dry to Manchester wet and Arctic cold and everything in between.
Make sure it's a Michelin.
Bibendum clearly approves. Although I would be more impressed if it was him doing the chalk writing himself. Bibendum is the Michelin man's name, if you weren't aware, and you just spent this entire section wondering what all this Latin was about. Bibendum. Thank you. And then we're back with the French-inspired late 80s wackiness of 3 men and a small infant human. These weren't necessarily the adverts you might expect to run during a family film. Photocopiers, banking, tyres, the Sunday Mail. Even the chocolate bar was self-consciously grown up. But they do fit the profile for the terrestrial premiere of a major box office hit movie, particularly one broadcasting in the most affluent area of the UK at the time. What was the smallest brand name in all of those? It was either the Sunday Mail or TSB. Certainly wasn't the United States of America. There might have been a recession on, but these things are all relative. This is still rich people's television of a sort. Not actual proper rich people. They don't watch television anyway. But affluent people. People richer than you, whoever you are. People with enough to spend that they could buy a car on a whim, or jet off to the USA. Not the people who'll be first against the wall by the end of the year, but probably a close second. Of course, there is a good chance that these people don't actually exist, but the advertisers would like you to think they do, and that there's a good chance you could become one of them. Maybe if you bought a Vauxhall Astra, you'd at least start looking the part. I doubt it. But they're banking on your thinking it's worth a try.
You've been watching a Bob the Fish production. Thanks! If you haven't found it already, be sure to check out our website at bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds of videos not unlike this one that will make you laugh, think and realise new things or your money back. Which works out great because they're all absolutely free. All of this is possible thanks to the not unique way that Bob the Fish productions are paid for by you, the viewing public, via Patreon. For a donation of as little as £1 a month, not only do you ensure that I still have food and shelter so I can carry on making these programmes, but you could become eligible for a whole host of cool extras. New video essays, special event live streams, all my content a week in advance, and my book on the history of the BBC, Rule the Waves, chapter by chapter as it's written. And some cake, if you go out and buy a cake and eat it while you're watching. And if you don't want to support on a monthly basis, you can make a one-off donation via coffee. It all helps stave off scurvy. bobthefish.org.uk. You make it what it is.